crazy year for us. And this makes all of a more reason to be proud of what we have achieved and to be here in front of you and share with you the success. So becoming product managers was to become a product manager is a big dream for a lot of people, and it still is, and for many people in the industry. And when we started out at BPM 1 year ago, we set out to help individuals, talented individuals, find a proven path to land their first product positions and succeed on the first year of the job. And even we didn't imagine the demand that there will be for becoming product managers. And we grew this group from 0 to over 6,000 members in under 1 year. We are the fastest growing PM community in Israel. And both Elena and myself are super excited to have you here. Before we are going to dive into this amazing session with Jackie, who is a global PM leader that did a lot of things in the PM world, written a lot of interesting books in the PM world. And we wanted to share with you some achievements that we had this year, and then we're going to dive into the session. So the first achievement is, I think, what we've set out to help is at the beginning of the year, we said we wanted to bring 10 new product managers to our community. Although this has been a crazy year for the job market, we helped dozens of people get into product management. On the last 5 weeks, we helped 6 people get into product management. And this is just growing, and we are so proud of this achievement. But we have much more. And Elena, you want to share some more achievements that we had?
Yeah, we are so exciting. And as a community, we've generated more than 1,000 posts and almost 10,000 comments filled with great insights on PM interviews, home assignments, books, podcasts, and success stories from our community. Our Product Management 101 course, built with Give and Take, was sold out after only 52 minutes, and we managed to donate over 54,000 shekels to Israeli charities. Together, we made this world a better place. All of this wouldn't be possible without you, the Becoming Product Managers community. All of you, aspiring product managers and junior product managers seeking advice and opportunities, our talented students thriving to success, and PM professionals that are always willing to help, and the team of our amazing mentors sharing their knowledge and experience. This great community power brought us here today. We thank all of you for being a part of our success. And the real story of this community boils down to one key insight, which is actionable value. We want to bring you the best content out there to break into product management and make your career a success. So we asked one of the best product career experts in the whole world to join us today and help you succeed. Ran?
Yeah, so as you all know, we're thrilled to have Jackie Bavaro with us. Jackie was recently head of product at Asana. She was the first product manager on the team, and she grew the team to over 20 product managers. She grew the business from $0 to over $100 million in 1 year. And she even initiated the associate product management program for Asana. Jackie coaches, mentors, manages, and advises hundreds of people in the product and people who aspire to move into product roles. And Jackie co-authored with Gail the best-selling book, Cracking the PM Interview. I've read it like a million times. I'm sure you all have read it a million times in order to succeed as a PM. And Jackie is helping people to level up their career and to grow as product managers. And Jackie has actually written a new book called Cracking the PM Career. It's going to debut next week. And we are so lucky to have you, Jackie, with us. And we are having a 30-minute session by Jackie, followed by Q&A, which Elena and I will take from the chat. And we are super excited to have this event. And we all wish you an enjoyable and interesting evening. So thank you, Jackie, and to you.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So I've got some slides. I'll go share them right now. And let's go ahead and get this showing. And so we'll talk about today. Let's see if we get this all up. And let me make that a little smaller so I don't have to look at myself. So as he said, I've written Cracking the PM Interview. And we're next week so excited to be releasing Cracking the PM Career. If you're interested in that, you can go to crackingthepmcareer.com and click notify me so you can get a message when it's available to buy. So what I was gonna talk about today, make sure my clicking is going right, is we're gonna start by talking about how I got into PMing and why I decided to write these books. And then I'm going to go from there to talk about what I've learned about becoming a successful PM, and then we'll go over to Q&A. So a while back, I was at Cornell and I was studying computer science and economics, and I had never heard about the product management role. And I was lucky enough to have a friend who said, Jackie, you should apply for this PM internship. And I said, I couldn't possibly be a product manager. I'm a sophomore in college. I'm not old enough to manage anyone. And he said, no, you manage the product, not the people. He's like, just go ahead and do it. And I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know what the role was. And on my first interviews, people asked me questions like, how would you design a TV set? Or how would you know like how many pizza parlors there are? And through the questions that I was asked, I started to form a model in my head of what product management might be. I was lucky enough to get that role. And I stayed at Microsoft for 2 summers and then joined full time. And I absolutely loved being a PM at Microsoft, but decided after a 1.5 years that I was going to move to New York, and Microsoft didn't have any PM jobs in New York. So I said, well, there's this company, Google, that everybody's talking about. In fact, Google had rejected me when I was an undergrad. I was like, I'll try again. So I apply to Google, I get a phone interview, I get another phone interview, and then rejected. So I was kind of upset about that, but I decided to stay with Microsoft for another year. And a year later, I applied and I got accepted to the Associate Product Manager program. So I stayed at Google for 3 years. I got to be a PM on the search team. I got to work on some data APIs, lots of different things. And importantly, I got to interview hundreds of people while I was there. And while I interviewed people, I started to, I had these different thoughts in my head. One of them was like, why did I get rejected when I applied before? Like, clearly they think I'm doing a good job here now. Like, what did I do wrong on the interview? How did I misunderstand it and get here? And from interviewing people, I saw the other side of it. I saw, oh, now I understand like what a good answer and a bad answer looks like. I started to see people say, some people would ramble. Some people would just talk and go and come up with ideas, and the ideas were really good, but it was hard as an interviewer to follow along. And so it was hard to give them a high score if they weren't very structured. And on the other side, some people were very structured, had terrible ideas, but they sounded so impressive until you start writing up your notes and you're like, wait a second, that wasn't quite right. And at the same time, I also had lots of people coming to me and saying, oh, my friend wants to apply to Google. Can you give them some hints on the interview? And I wanted to be nice, so I would help people out. But I also started to get this idea that, that it wasn't a very level playing field, right? If I was going to talk to friends of a friend and help them and tell them interview tips, then what about someone who doesn't have any friends who's a PM? Like, how are those people going to learn these interview tips? And so these ideas started to sort of swirl around in my mind. And during that time, then I switched over. A friend that I used to work with at Microsoft told me that his company was hiring their first PM, and that was Asana. So I joined Asana as their first PM and started working on the team, and grew into being head of product management and started to grow the team, really worked on building the team out, building great products, learned so much about what it's like to be a PM there. And at that same time, these ideas around leveling the playing field really came out, and I decided that I wanted to start writing about product management. So I started a blog, and that's when Gail, who's my co-author, reached out to me and was like, hey, we should write a book together. And I looked at her other book, Cracking the Coding Interview, which is a top bestseller on Amazon. And I was really excited to be able to share this information, and really had this goal of saying sort of 2 sides of it. One is I wanted to make sure that there are great product managers in the world, because product managers have such an important role that we're picking which problems are important to solve. And so if we have really good people being product managers and a really diverse set of people who care about different problems, we'll have more problems that we care about being solved in the world, and we'll have better products. So I wanted to have more great PMs, and I wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to become a good PM. So I started writing about that. And the other side of it was also this, this curiosity that I had, which is saying, I tend to be a little bit arrogant sometimes, or a little bit, I think a lot of myself. And I was like, I know I'm a really good PM. If I can't figure out interviewing, like, how could anyone else do it? Like, why didn't anybody tell me that this is how you interview? So I really wanted to sort of take this ambiguous problem of how you do well on interviews and break it down into, okay, here's what actually a good interview looks like. And that same pattern reapplied for this new book that I wrote, which is at Microsoft and at Google and at Asana. I've gotten lots of promotions, but I didn't get every promotion. There were some times when for example, when I was a new PM and I said, okay, I want to do really well. I'm working on all this stuff. What do I need to do to get better? And my manager said, oh, just keep doing what you're doing. And I was like, keep doing what I'm doing? Like, are you saying that it's just like time, that tenure is the only thing that matters to become like an advanced PM? Am I just as good as these PMs with 10 years of experience and I just need to wait? And it turns out now that I've been on the other side of it, that's not what they meant. I think what they meant was the most important thing to focus on right now is shipping the product you're working on, and it'll be hard to evaluate your skills until your product's shipped. But I think they also could have said, and by the way, here's what people with the level above you are learning, and here's what the next level looks like. Because one of the things I learned as I wrote this book and as I became a manager is that the work you do as an entry-level PM, as a PM for your first maybe 3 years or so, is actually just a subset of all the work that the other PMs do. So we'll get into this later, but there was a whole part of product management that I didn't even see. And so it's hard for me to know what success would look like, and it was hard for me to know what being a great PM would look like. And so that sort of motivated writing this new book. I really didn't want it to be a surprise about how promotions work, what great product management works. I wanted to really teach everybody so everybody had a fair chance to become a great product manager. So I'm going to go into a bunch of different parts of what I've learned about being a successful PM. I'll go a little bit quickly, make sure we get to touch it all, and then feel free to ask questions at the end to get into any of these and more. So the first really interesting thing here is that, let me move that out of the way so I can see myself, see what I'm doing, is that I looked at a lot of career ladders from a lot of different companies, and every company has their own description of what makes a great PM. But if you look one level deeper and try to see what do they really care about, it's the same across all the companies. Some companies will care a little bit more strongly about, data skills, and some of them will care a lot more about collaboration, and some of them are more strategic focused. But this set of skills is sort of the skills that people care about across all product manager roles. So when you're thinking about becoming a great PM, these are the types of PM skills to really be considering. So I'm going to go into just a few of my favorite insights that I learned from these. I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but these were some of the ones that I thought were really interesting about what it means to be a great product manager. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a product skill, which is around creativity. And what I used to think that creativity was this like somebody has an idea in the shower and they're just like a naturally creative person, like, oh, I wish I could be Steve Jobs. I wish I had these ideas. And that it was either you had it or you didn't. But what I learned over time is that most creative solutions come from cross-applying a solution from another domain. So what I mean is, if you think about like YouTube is a site where they had lots of user-generated videos. People upload their videos. Reddit, on the other hand, has this really cool thing where when you visit the site for the first time, you don't need to sign up, and you just get a feed of information that an algorithm picks the most interesting things for you. And if you take those two ideas and combine them, you get the TikTok For You page. It's sort of like a logged out algorithmic feed, but of user-generated videos. So they were able to, it's not a brand new idea, it takes two and combines them together. I've seen other examples of this where I actually talked to somebody who is head of YouTube for a while, head of product at YouTube, And they had a tough question. This is Shashir Malhotra. They had a tough question of, if you search for like a TV show Modern Family on YouTube, and YouTube doesn't have Modern Family and they know that it's on some other site, should they send you to that other site? And they couldn't answer this question. But Shashir had sat in on a product review from another product from Google Shopping. And in that product review, he heard them talking about this dichotomy between comprehensiveness and consistency. Is it better to show everything, make sure you don't miss anything? Or is it better to have a consistent user experience so that people can use your product in an expected way? And so he was able to take this framework that he learned from another product team and apply it to his product team and decide that, and change the question to, is YouTube the kind of market where comprehensiveness is rewarded or where consistency is rewarded? And so they ended up deciding consistency was rewarded, and that drove a lot of their strategy. So as a new PM, as an aspiring PM, first thing is to study lots of great products. Great product managers love products, use them all the time. When a new product comes out, try to use it. Old products that exist, take a look at them, analyze them, see what they do really well. Maybe they're terrible products, but they do one really interesting thing. And that one really interesting thing might be the spark of creativity that will make your product better. And look broadly for inspiration. This is one of the reasons why I think great PMs don't only read PM books, they read books about negotiation, and they'll read books about parks and cities and, inventions and all sorts of things, because taking an idea that works really well in one place and moving it to your place is a good way to come up with new solutions. All right. Next one. This is, I think, one of the most important things for product managers. I talk about this all the time, is that you have to validate your ideas. So as a new PM, you might think that that your ideas are great and you're sure that they're right, and you want to go full steam ahead, having your engineering team build them and get them out into the world as quickly as possible. And it seems like it would slow you down to try to to test this idea with lots of people, or run an A/B test, or even stop somebody in the hallway and ask them a question. But one of the things I think you tend to learn by the time you've had about 3 years of PM experience is that there are a lot of surprises in the world of product design and product discovery, and things that you were sure would work sometimes are surprisingly don't work. I remember one design we thought was perfect, we had changed how you create a new project, and everybody was creating new projects. We're like, great. It turned out people thought the little plus button to create a new project was supposed to expand and contract the list of projects, just to view the projects. Totally a big surprise to us, and it wasn't one we'd expected. But when we validated it, we saw this problem. So validating ideas doesn't have to take a long time. You can show sketches to people in the hallway. You can talk to customers. You can talk to your friends. Before running an experiment, a common thing I see is a PM is like, okay, I want to improve the design on the settings page. And I say, well, how many of our users get to that settings page? And it's 1% of all of our users. Once you know it's only 1%, you might decide that's not the most valuable place to invest. So yeah, lots of different ways to validate ideas. And one of the sort of easy things to do is a lot of times people don't even make a decision. They don't even realize that there's a decision to make. So they build one solution, and that's the only choice they consider. And if you just add one other idea, if you force yourself to always think of at least 2 ideas rather than choosing the first thing you did, that tiny bit of expansive thinking will improve your solutions a lot. Following up on validating your ideas, as a product manager, it's important to get your product in front of real users as early as possible. And this diagram from, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Enrique Nieberg, is one of my favorites. It talks about the idea of incremental development, or MVPs, and how people tend to misunderstand them. So building something incrementally isn't releasing like non-functional parts of something. So if you're trying to build a car, you don't release a tire first because no one can use a tire. But instead, if you're trying to build a car, you can start by releasing a skateboard, and maybe nobody likes that. But if you start working from there, you'll start getting feedback earlier on. And while you're working towards your end goal, you might learn something new. So in this particular example, they learned that people loved feeling the wind in their hair. So instead of building a normal car, they built a convertible. And you're able to get more customer delight than if you went full steam ahead towards your first idea. It's gonna be a little bit of a whirlwind tour. Next thing is about experiments, A/B tests. So this is when you give a change to a small percentage of your users. And they are incredible, but they also get overused. So they're good for detecting large immediate changes. And you tend to need a lot of users to do this. So if you have 1 million users visiting your website a day, this is great. If you have 1,000, you probably won't be able to detect much, or it would take you much longer than you'll be willing to wait to see it. So it's really great, for example, if you send out if you send out 100,000 emails a day and you want to try changing the subject line, and you can test, do more people open it? Because that's something where the effect could be large and it would be right away you'd see it. But it's bad for things like throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying 100 different subject lines and trying to see which one's best. And this is because of the nuances of the statistics behind these. So if I say I'm gonna flip a coin and get heads 4 times in a row, that'd be great if you did it on your first try. But if you're just gonna keep flipping that coin again and again and again until you get 4 heads in a row, that doesn't mean that you've done something impressive. It doesn't mean that the coin, for example, is weighted to 4 heads. They're also bad at catching longer term effects, for example, to brand or to word of mouth growth. So sometimes people will, we had an idea to do a bright pink button to invite people in our product. And yes, more people clicked on the button to invite people, but we didn't launch it because we knew that that test wasn't going to detect that people thought that our product was kind of pushy and too promotional, and that like pink was just kind of a janky, not a very pretty color to use there, it was too bright. So we knew that those A/B tests weren't going to actually detect all of the changes that would show up. And in that particular case, the reason that we did try the big pink color was just to tell how big is the effect. Because if bright pink couldn't get more people to click on the button, then we knew that we didn't even have to try any other colors to get people to click on this button. All right, moving on to execution skills. This is a really easy one, but one of the best ways to get your team to create good things and to run smoothly is to think about fun forcing functions. So demos is a great example of this. Is if you have a team and your team is just doesn't seem to finish up their work as fast as you want, instead of nagging them to say like, come on, you said you were gonna get it done today, please get it done, please get it done. You can use people's incentives and say, hey, we're showing demos on Friday. Anybody who wants to show live code can demo it to the rest of the team. And without having to remind people or push people to get their code done, people will on their own be excited to show off their work and want to do it. This is a tiny little tip, a great way to, it's a great mindset to use when thinking about your team, is how can you make it so that people feel their own motivation to get their work done rather than have you try to push it on them. Next one, this one's on execution also, and it's time management. So one of the biggest problems that PMs face is they don't have enough time. And I talked to lots and lots of people who are trying to figure out how am I, going to be more strategic if my team needs me all the time and I can't get things done. So what I found works really well is first you have to accept that you don't have time to do it all. And then one of the best ways to do that is create this pie chart of ideally where you'd be spending your time. And the reason I say a pie chart is because you can't fit more than 100% into a pie chart. So if you want more time for strategic thinking, it has to come away from one of these other buckets. And so when you're thinking about this level of abstraction, you can see where you want to spend your time. And then you can, for a week, for example, track where your time is going and see what you need to adjust. But when I see people who have trouble getting it all done, it's really because they haven't yet really believed that they have to give something up. They say, oh, I'll work a few extra hours to get it done. But the nature of the PM role is that there is so much that you can do and you really have to prioritize where you spend your time. And I do generally recommend having at least 25, maybe even 50% of your time being available for your team. Because as a PM, if your team needs you and you're too busy to help them, sometimes all of the work can grind to a halt while they're waiting for you to be available. All right, next one I want to talk about is strategy. So in terms of strategic skills, this is something that was a big aha moment for me. is many PMs, this is when you get closer to the mid-level of PM, so like breaking into senior PM, they get told at some point, like, you're not strategic enough. You need to be more strategic. And just about every PM who hears this says, what do you mean? I thought I was being strategic. So one of the things I realized is that there are three different things that three different parts to a product strategy. And depending on your company might care really about one of them or two of them. But you might have had a view that product strategy is that third one. So if you're trying to build a strategy and be more strategic, the first thing is to build a strategy that has all three pieces, and that way you'll make sure you cover all of them. So first part is the product vision. This is your idea of your long-term vision of how the world will be a better place, you know, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now, once your product has, of how your product can make the world a better place. So this can be a sentence, but what I really like here is to do a little like kind of storyboard style click through narrative. And so this can be something like, you know, Jackie wakes up in the morning and she's so hungry, but what she sees is, you know, her meal plan has already delivered her all the food she needs. And this is important for a few reasons. One reason is that if your product vision isn't inspiring and exciting, and it isn't something that you and your team wants to work towards, then it means that the work your team's doing is probably not that valuable and important, right? You wouldn't want to work for 2 years and have what your whole team built end up being something that wasn't inspiring and exciting and important in the world. So if you don't have a vision for how all of your work adds up to something big and to something that changes people's lives, reduces their pain points, and it could include business value for your company, depending on how business versus customer centric your company likes to do it. If you don't have that yet, then that's something to really work on. And going back to time management, I just say block off half a day on your calendar and say, I'm working on my vision now. You could pretend you're out of office if you need to. You could be like, I have a doctor's appointment. Please don't anybody schedule anything with me. Turn off all your notifications and just go in and write something. Because getting that first draft out is the starting point. And once you have that, everything becomes easier because you'll get feedback and all the rest becomes clear. So vision is where you want to get to. Strategic framework is sort of the details of that vision and the plan that you have of how to get there. So that's sort of your written explanation of why you believe in this vision. And that can include the principles, the frameworks, the trade-offs, the big bets you're making, the big bets you're not making. And the way that I find it hard to write a strategic framework in a vacuum. I tend to write it in response to everybody's criticism of my plan, if that makes sense. So when the CEO comes and they're like, why aren't you building this? My strategic framework will explain why we're not building that and why we're building something else. So I have it as the sort of written documentation that explains what we're doing. And then the last part is the roadmap. So this is can be like very rough. It can be quarter by quarter, for example, but it says like, here's our vision, here's where we are today, and then here's what we're doing next, you know, the next quarter, here's what we're doing the next year, here's what we're doing in the next 5 years. And this is important for a few reasons. One is that it lets you know if your vision is feasible, right? Maybe you look at it and you realize it'll take you 20 years to get to your vision. And then maybe that's not fast enough for your company. Your startup will have gone bankrupt by then. So, so having some sense of how long it will take will help you understand, can you get there fast? The other part is that this is how you advocate for your team and for the resources you need. So maybe you look at it and it'll take 20 years to get there if you only have 2 engineers, which is your current team size. But if people are really excited about your vision and you show them that with 10 teams working on this, you could get there much faster. Maybe you even notice that you need to start investing in machine learning, or you need to start investing in hardware skills. So this roadmap will show you like who your company needs to hire and what skills your team needs to develop to be able to achieve that. So those three together, yeah, end up being your, sorry, I'm gonna try this side, help you create a full product strategy. Just go one click deeper on the roadmap. This is something that I see a lot from experienced PMs is they say, how do we make time for engineering debt? Or, you know, we have all these projects to increase growth, but how do we also increase the revenue at the same time? And easy solution to this is instead of having your roadmap be a single ranked list where you're like, this is most important, second most, and so on, and we're going to do them in this order, treat it as a balanced portfolio. So create, for example, one list of all the things you want to do for growth experiments, one for all the revenue work you want to do, and one for all the engineering debt you want to do. And then at a very high level, talk to your team about how you want to distribute your resources. So maybe you all feel that a third, and a third is the right amount. Or maybe somebody will say, no, it should be 70, 20, 10. And these conversations at the very rough percentage level are usually pretty easy to have. Usually everybody agrees that, like, yeah, it makes sense that we shouldn't spend less than 10% of our energy on eng debt. And it makes sense that we should be spending, most of our energy on our core business type use cases. So once you have that, then you can choose the work that your team does based on, you can pull it from those three lists to match the percentages you agreed on. And that'll help make sure that you're not over investing in one area or ending up in a bad situation where you always compare, right now, is it more valuable to build a new feature or eng debt? And every time the new feature wins, but over the course of a year, now all that eng debt has added up and ended up worse for your team. This is a little bit about, a little bit more about what it means to be strategic. So we talked about creating a strategy. The next part is you have to actually use that strategy. You have to get your team to actually work towards that strategy and not get caught in urgent but not important things. Communication is another huge part of being strategic. If maybe you know your strategy yourself, but your boss doesn't know it and your engineers don't know it, your designer doesn't understand it, the sales people have no idea what you're doing. If they don't, you've been so inspired by your own long-term vision. If they don't know that vision, then they won't be inspired. They won't be excited to help work towards that. And they might make mistakes. They won't understand the purpose of the work they're doing. And that means that they'll slowly get off course. So as a strategic leader, it's really important to share your strategy with everyone. And you need much more repetition than you would think. This is a sort of thing where every meeting you try to reference back to your strategy. Always remind people when you talk to them of why their work is strategic and how it fits in. And then the other part of being strategic is taking a long-term big picture and systems thinking approach to your work. So biggest thing here is even noticing that something has strategic implications. Is if I see a PM who I think isn't very strategic, sometimes they just run straight ahead with the decision and they never even stop to wonder whether this would hurt scalability or if it would cause a problem with another team. So even just taking that time to slow down and think about the broader implications of your choices. And then if it has broader implications, not believing that there's a single right answer, but seeing this as a set of trade-offs, and that these trade-offs are real. And that your job as a PM, and especially as a senior PM, is to grapple with those trade-offs and understand the implications and come up with a framework to help people decide and choose between them. Next, so stakeholder management. I'm going to jump into, stakeholder management. Quick thing on that is that if you're having trouble with stakeholder management, it usually means you haven't spent long enough understanding your stakeholders and their goals and their pain points and their worries. So you'll end up in a situation where you're talking about how your product is faster and you haven't even noticed that your salespeople don't have time to train their team. So your solutions don't resonate with them because you didn't understand what they cared about. So, set up a coffee chat with them, talk to them a little bit, just spend more time understanding them. And when you understand them really well, stakeholder management becomes easier. Articulating your frameworks. This one is just a quick one to, don't keep the way you're making decisions all in your head. Say them out loud. That lets people see the wisdom behind your decisions, and it helps other people make the same kind of decisions you would make even when you're not in the room, and that will help you scale. All right, let's see. Go maybe 3 more minutes. So going back to what I talked about early as I said that when I was an APM, I didn't even know what senior PMs did. So there's really 3 phases to product management careers. The first one is shipping product. And that's somebody has told you, hey, we need to build a checkout page, and you can get better and better at creating the best checkout page. But as you advance in your career, you get to this next phase of product strategy. And this is where you're deciding which problems to go after and what to do. You have to be the person who realized that your team should be building a checkout page. And you get better and better at product strategy, long-term planning. And then there's another phase that you don't see that comes into more of the managerial side, which is organizational excellence. So this is how do you hire, recruit people, and build a strong functioning team, give people the coaching and development and training they need, and the processes and the frameworks so that they can make good decisions and they can do good product strategy and ship good products with less of your time. So you can scale yourself and expand and have that go bigger. So that's sort of the beyond the horizon, the next parts that get better. And I talked about trade-offs already. I think this might be our last slide, is partnering with your manager on your career goals. This might be really obvious to everyone, but your relationship with your manager is one of the most important parts of your career success in terms of promotions and raises and things like that. Your manager is the one who will decide, do you get promoted? They'll decide what projects you get allocated to. They might be part of a promotion committee as well. So it's really important to invest in your relationship with your manager and to make sure that you understand your manager's goals and that your manager understands your goals. So you want to talk to them, hear what they're working on, what they're worried about, what keeps them up at night. And let them know what way you want to grow. You don't want to be like, oh, I want to be a people manager right now. Why haven't I gotten it? Why did you give it to this other person? You don't want to be obnoxious. But you can say, hey, I would love to be a people manager someday. I would love to hear your thoughts on what skills I need to develop, so I'll be ready when a role opens up. So that future-looking framing of it can really help show where you're trying to go. And then this last template over here is one that I just really love talking about. If people complain that their bosses micromanage them, and if your boss micromanages you, it's often because you haven't been communicating well enough with them. So they feel like they have no idea what you're doing. So instead, you want to proactively share what you're doing. And this is a template I use. I say, here's what's happening. We just noticed that there's a big error in the data migration, and it means the data is all corrupted. And then you say, here's how I'm going to handle it, or here's what I'm thinking about. So I'm planning on delaying the launch right now. I'm going to communicate to all the teams, and then we're going to send the engineers to go discover what it is, but we'll keep this team going on. And then the last part is, any thoughts? How's that sound? The reason this 3-part template works so well is first, you're informing your manager about what's going on. You're keeping them in the loop, but you're not asking them to solve it for you. You're not just like, what do I do? But you're actually kind of jumping in there and letting them know what you've thought of. Because sometimes people, maybe you have thought of all these good things and your manager is going to give you all this advice and you knew it already. But if they had to tell you, they're going to think you didn't know. So you tell them what your plan is, and now they can appreciate what you've done, and they'll also know how far you've gotten, and they'll also see you taking ownership of solving the problem yourself. And then that last part invites their feedback, because one of the things about managers being only human is some people sort of resist feedback, and they make it really hard for the manager to jump in with another idea. And when that happens, it kind of builds resentment. And the manager will think, well, this person isn't very good. They don't even realize that their plan isn't perfect. So when you say, do you have any thoughts, or how's that sound? It gives them an opening to give you any feedback they want. And because you invited it, it doesn't reflect badly on you. It gives you a chance to really say that part of your whole plan was getting their feedback on this. So that really balances sharing information and showing ownership mentality. And let's see, I think I'm not going to talk about day in the manager. So yeah, that's all I had for this. And this is just a slide of sort of the chapters in my new book, in case that inspires you with any other questions to ask. But yeah, now time for Q&A. Should I'll stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, that's okay. So first of all, Jackie, thank you for an amazing session. I learned a lot, and it helps me understand why I'm being not strategic enough, even though I think I am sometimes. So it's great. I'm sure there are a lot of questions from the crowd here, so we are going to take them one by one. Feel free to write in the chat, and Elena and I are going to take them. So the first question from Dina is, how would you look about an ideal weekly schedule for a product manager? How would you allocate them through the week? If there's any tips around that.
A deal, sorry. A weekly schedule. How do you do it? So what I do is I like to do a lot of blocking off my calendar with sort of meetings with myself, fake meetings. And that's how I can plan ahead, and because it stops somebody else from filling in my calendar with lots of little meetings. And it reminds me, and it sort of holds myself accountable for using that time for the strategic work or the data analysis work. I think there's not like a single ideal weekly schedule because it'll really depend on your team. So a lot of people will have daily stand-ups with their engineers. They'll have a meeting with their own feature team, a meeting with their designer, meetings with the broader team, all hands meetings. The people's schedules tend to get filled up with a lot of that. Definitely, I think if your company can have a no meeting day, like a no meeting Wednesday or no meeting Thursday, that's helpful for everybody, because anybody who needs flow time to get their work done needs that uninterrupted time. Because if you're in the middle of writing a spec, or an engineer's in the middle of designing a new data structure, somebody comes in and says oh, wait a second, can you come over here and sign these forms for a minute? Okay, and now they get back, and it takes them several minutes to get back into the flow of things.
Right, Jackie, thank you very much. It was an amazing session. I have a question about the last topic you talked about partnering with your manager. So when you are interviewing and you're sitting in front of your future manager, how can you figure out if this manager will be a good partner for your future career?
Oh, good question. Let's see. I think so. The honest truth is, it's a lot easier once you're inside a company. Is that if you are interviewing, you don't always have that much choice of who your manager is going to be. And especially if you're a new PM, it's hard to get your foot in the door. Once you're at a company, you can ask around and find out who are the good managers, who does get their people promoted really quickly, who really does seem to help out. And I especially say that if somebody's having trouble at their job, doing an internal transfer can be great for that reason, because you really can get the inside scoop on who the good managers are. If you're interviewing and you have a choice between lots of companies and you're not sure, the thing that kind of holds me back from giving yeah, you could ask me oh, how do you support the people on your team, or how do you help people grow, or what's a great person look like from your point of view, or can you tell me about somebody you've helped grow? And you could try those, but I also worry that one thing I didn't go into too much is there's a catch-22 with ambition, which is that almost all PMs are very ambitious. We tends to be the field that attracts people who really want to succeed and advance quickly. But managers like people who are ambitious and work really hard, but they don't like people who seem ambitious. Is that if you really seem like you're out for yourself and you're well, how am I going to grow as fast as possible? And how do I make sure that I only work on the hot projects that are going to get me the promotions, and make sure that I only work on the most public facing stuff so that I get the credit for it. That kind of person wouldn't be a good team player and wouldn't actually be the best person to hire for the company. So if you are interviewing and trying to understand about if your manager will support you, you do want to be careful about not seeming like you're only out for yourself.
Right. Thank you very much.
So another question from the crowd here is, what resources would you recommend to gain knowledge and skills needed to advance your career? Of course, the PM career we are looking forward to it, but additionally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely I'm hoping that my new book will help with that a lot. I think that the community you're all in is incredibly helpful. I think that having other PMs who are your mentors, who are your buddies, who are at the same, I like to look for people who are at the same level as me and people who are maybe a few years ahead of me. And if you have a community of people like that where you can talk to them about things, they'll have seen things before. They might have ideas for how to handle the situations you run into. I find that that's a really great way to learn. One other thing is if you're at a company, I would definitely say sitting in on other people's work is another great way. If you get to observe the challenges that other people face and see how they overcome them, maybe sit in on a product review or a data analysis meeting, that lets you sort of learn twice as fast.
That's great. Thank you. Let's follow up on that. So when a PM looks at his career, is there any tips about choosing like a business domain you're going to work at? So regarding the career planning phase, is it like B2B, B2C? Any thoughts on that for when you look at your career growth?
Yeah. So there are, so B2B and B2C are both great. I personally love B2B, and I know there's a lot of B2B PMs who feel the same way. The reason for that, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the choice, but this is more personal preference, is that in B2B, you are selling software to someone who is going to pay for it because they have a pain point that they need solved. And that is incredibly straightforward. And as a PM, it's pretty easy to talk to customers, understand their needs, understand if your solution is going to solve their needs, and build it, and then it solves it, and now they pay money for it, and that whole loop just makes sense. It's not there's not a lot of like luck and chance in it. Like it really is. If you are a good PM, you can succeed as a B2B PM. B2C, I think, has a lot more external forces. There's just a lot more of like what the trends are going on in the world, or if you're like reliant on an app store that then cuts you off. There's a lot more externalities that make it a little bit it's a little bit riskier or harder to like figure out how do you build something that's really great. And so you might be a great PM and you get unlucky and your product doesn't succeed. So that's my personal preference, is I love B2B. And I love also just that like people at work like really want better tools. They really, you get a lot of love from your customers when you build a good B2B tool. In terms of generally picking a company, my general thought, and this is obviously, it'll definitely depend on you and your companies that you have a choice of. But I think that starting your career in a big company for a few years and then moving to a fast growing company tends to be a really great way to supercharge your career. Because those years you spend at a big company, you're absorbing best practices. You're learning how the biggest, best companies in the world get product done. And that'll be incredibly valuable. And especially if you decide then to go to a smaller company, just the fact that you know what the spec template looks like at that big company, or you understand how they do launch freezes. Any of these things that you've absorbed while being at that company for 3 to 4 years will help you in your new role. And then if you go to a fast growing company, you can stay at a big company. Those, you might have better work-life balance. But if you then switch to a company that's hiring lots of people, moving fast, growing fast, you'll get the opportunity, you often get the opportunity to work on something that is, that's bigger and more advanced than you could ever get hired into. So I saw this, I talked to lots of people who grew really quickly at Twitter when it was growing fast, and they wouldn't have gotten hired in as a PM or been allowed to run this large team before, but they'd already earned credibility with their team because they'd been there from earlier on, and the team needed somebody there, and they just needed to grow really fast. So they had all these open gaps that a PM could step into.
It's a great answer, thank you. We have a question here from the crowd about the home assignments during the product manager's recruitment process. So I just want to share that soon we will be releasing our online course on async home assignments. So anyone who wants, who is interested in, want to stay tuned, so you can PM me or Ran, and we will share details. So I don't know if home assignments are common among US companies during the recruitment process. So can you share a bit about it and how to deal with them?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this. I haven't done, so I have, as a hiring manager, I've done assignments, and as a candidate, I've done assignments, but I haven't done a round of research on this. So I don't know for sure across all the companies, and I haven't talked to a lot of hiring managers about how they evaluate them. But what I might say is first is to consider, is the the assignment at the beginning or at the end of the recruitment process. And if you have an assignment at the beginning of the recruitment process, my experience as a hiring manager, we had an early assignment, is that we weren't looking for anything like incredibly impressive. Is that the early stage assignments are more of a like quick filter to see if people like understand what product management is about. Like, can they be customer focused? Do they understand like what a good goal or a bad goal is? Do they, when you ask somebody like about a product, do they focus on tiny nitpicking details that don't really matter, or do they actually hone in on something that will be important and will matter to the company? So one of the ways that I see people go a little bit astray is they try to be incredibly creative. They try to be like, whoa, we're going to change the whole world and go forward. And at least for the assignment that I used to do, that wasn't the best way to go. I mean, some people went really creative and it was great. But a lot of people like just missed obvious stuff, and like a straightforward, obvious answer would have been fine. They didn't need to be like incredible. But I don't know for sure if that applies everywhere. And it probably applies a little bit less if it's at the end, if it's after your rounds of on-site interviews.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. We have here another question about COVID-19 that allows many companies to hire product managers remotely. So do you think it is easier now for people that don't live at the US to apply to US companies and get accepted?
I don't have a great answer for that. It might be. You could try, but I haven't done a survey to see about that.
Thanks.
That's great. So since we are targeting junior and aspiring product managers, I think it begs the question is to what you look and it's junior product managers, what are the top skills they need to develop, and what are the top things they need to show during interviews?
Yeah. So I think most important one that I look for is product mindset. And product mindset is this ability to think about what goal you want to go after, what does success look like, and then come up with a solution that will match that definition of success you had. So it's this intentionality of product choices that you're building them for a reason, and you're building them because they will meet customer and business goals. So the alternative, if somebody doesn't have product mindset, the two things that I see is, one is I see project manager mindset. So this is the mindset of saying, okay, you tell me what you want me to do and I will make sure it gets done. It's a great mindset to have, but it's just not a product mindset. The other one is sort of this enthusiast mindset, where somebody says like, oh, this will be fun to do. I want to use that new technology. Let's build this. This will be really cool. And you might have incredibly creative ideas. And a lot of founders can be successful with this mindset. But you're not, each choice you're not making for a reason. So as a PM interviewing for jobs, just always start with the goals. When I do an interview, I write at the top of my paper, as I say, always start with the goals. And I look down before I answer any question, and whatever the question is, I start with the goals. And then make sure you tie your answers back to those goals. So somebody says, you know, what's your favorite product? You're like, well, here's like my favorite product and why it's my favorite product. And if I'm going to improve that product, it ought to have something to do with, you know, the goals of that product or the goals of that business. It shouldn't just be, you know, random ideas that won't achieve something important.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jackie. We have here a question related to the soft skills. How you can gain more visibility in a company or in front of your manager?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, how to gain more visibility for your work in the company?
Okay, yeah, good question. So actually a really good way to do this is to send good status reports. PM sometimes can go, oh, status reports. But if you actually take it back to, if you always start with the goals, think about what you're trying to achieve. Your status reports can be inspiring. They can be exciting. They can be kind of promotional. You can celebrate what your team's been doing. And at a lot of companies, I've heard of this when I talk about people forming relationships with their managers' peers, is if you're working on a project and you're saying, here's what our project is, here's why it's important, this is why our project, like, hey, everybody, remember we are redesigning the settings page. This is because we've discovered that, that like user growth is really limited in this way, right? You don't just talk about the feature you're building, but saying like, this relates to our goal of improving revenue in this way, and draw those connections. Now people understand that like, okay, this is why my product is important. You'll hear it sometimes also as the elevator pitch of like, what are you working on? You don't say, I'm redesigning the settings page. You say, I'm making it so that people get their answers 5% faster or whatever it is. And then you can really talk about like, celebrate what your team's done, talk about what things are coming up, talk about any resources you need from other people, and even just have that as a starting point. So that's a really positive way to get extra visibility. People across the company usually like those status reports, especially if they're done well and they're fun to read. When I was at Asana, people like would fill them up with emojis to make them like just like a little bit silly and more entertaining. And people won't like resent you. It's not a political way of trying to get visibility. It's not getting visibility at the expense of somebody else. I'd say that more generally, it's really going to be this idea of connecting your work strategically to something else. Is that if you're just working on a feature, like, yeah, nobody cares about that. But if you are working towards a goal that the company thinks is important, now you might get a chance to talk to more people about it. You might have a reason to join other conversations.
It's a great insight. Thank you. I think our time is running out. So to summarize, I think if you can tell a little bit more about the new book and how we can pre-order it, and how it can help aspiring product managers too.
Yeah. So the new book is coming out next week. Because we're self-published, they're not putting our pre-order page, I think, outside of the US Amazon. So if you go to crackingthepmcareer.com, there's a notify me button, and we will send out a message once the book is actually released, and then you can go and buy it on Amazon. We'll have it we're going to do a Kindle version eventually, but it might take a few months because we have to relay out all the pages and everything like that. And the book covers what it takes to be a successful PM. Really, what I try to do is say, how do you build up the mental models and the frameworks so that you can make good decisions going forward? Because it's not just about knowing all of this information, but it's really about having a higher level picture of how everything fits together, so that in the spur of the moment when you need to make a product decision, you're able to narrow in on which framework is the right one to use. And be able to make good decisions that way. So it's 80% about product skills, 20% on all the career skills. How do you choose the right company? How do you work well with your manager? What does it mean to be a senior PM? That kind of stuff. Yeah, coming out next week.
So that's super exciting. And again, thank you very much, Jackie, for taking the time. Thank you to all the community that has built this great individuals growing and great opportunity for everyone to become product managers. And I want to take this last minute to tell you, everyone, that we have a responsibility for building the next generation of product managers. And each and every one of you knows a great product manager that can help us get to that goal. So make sure that by the end of the session, you invite at least one great product manager to our community, because we have a responsibility to build the next generation, and I'm counting on you. And to all the aspiring PMs out there, many made it this year and many more are going to make it next year. And we are looking forward to grow together and learn together. So thank you very much to everyone. Thank you, Jackie, especially, and we'll see you in the community.
Thank you very much for joining. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.